This is the Troutbitten podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout. This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten podcast, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swentowski. I'm the owner of Troutbitten and the author of troutbitten.com. All right, welcome back, Troutbitten friends. First, I want to thank many of you for your kind words and enthusiasm for this podcast season. I've received more comments and questions than ever this time. Stats and download numbers are great too, but it kind of proves the theory that anglers really do care about the details. I know there's a belief out there among some publishers in the industry, for example, that the angling public doesn't want things to be complicated, that education around fishing should be simplified. So we see that approach most often across platforms, from authors, guides, educators in videos, and wherever else. But as you know, that's not what we do at Troutbitten. I gave a presentation to a great group of anglers at a Trout Unlimited meeting last night on the topic that we have for this season, on critical nymphing concepts. And I said it this way: fishing is simple, but catching fish can be complicated. So tonight's topic is about weight. I say it's the fundamental factor in nymphing, because as soon as you choose to leave the surface, once you clip off the dry fly and fish anything else, weight is necessary. Even wet flies have some weight. They're designed not to float, but to break the surface with at least the weight of the hook, right? With streamers, of course, weight is required to get your flies to whatever depth is necessary. And we do that with all types of weight, whether that's a sinking line, split shot, or weight built into the fly. We'll talk about different weight types here in a bit. And then, of course, with nymphs, our topic, we need weight, just like streamers, to get the flies to some kind of depth and actually fish them. You can't avoid it. Weight is the fundamental factor, meaning it's probably more important than the fly itself. More weight or less is more consequential than what dubbing, feather, or ribbing is wound around the hook shank. Think about that. We use all types of weight, and there are good reasons for all of these: tungsten beads, split shot, and drop shot. So in this episode, we'll talk about why, when, and how we might use all of these types of weight while nymphing. And more importantly, we'll consider the concept of choosing more or less weight to affect the drift, to match the situation, or to have a particular effect on the drift and the presentation. Tonight, we'll try to look at weight with a little more objectivity and with a little more detail than just, hey, use more weight if you're not getting down. As with all of these critical nymphing concepts, we'll open this one up and unpack the possibilities. So that's our plan. And it's time to bring in my co-host and chairman of the board, Austin Dando.
How we doing, buddy?
There he is.
Chairman this week.
Mr. Chairman?
I feel like that's a little less than I was last week. I was staff sergeant, wasn't I?
Yes, staff sergeant. Yes, sir.
I don't know if we're still getting promoted.
Chairman of the board.
Chairman of what board?
Troutbitten.
Wow.
Troutbitten board.
Then I'm definitely demoted.
It's not quite CEO. I was looking things up.
I'm CFO, remember?
No,
Chief,
that's right.
Chief Fishing Officer.
Oh, fishing, right? Not financial, but fishing.
Very good, Dominic.
You'd need more skills to be a chief fishing officer. Chief bullshitter. There he is.
CBO.
CBO. All right. Hey, these skills series are supposed to be short. We've been coming in at like 40, 45 minutes, right? One of them was 50. That's all right. You remember our first skills series? Our first season on the skills series platform? We were like 20, 25 minutes.
Well, that's always the idea, right?
Right. All right. This time, though, we're actually going to make it a little bit longer. We're going to put a couple questions in here because, again, we're getting a lot of great questions. We do appreciate that feedback. And I like to choose questions that are that kind of come in multiple times, right? So here's one of them. I received this question from a friend whom I guided a couple of years ago. So Mark from Michigan asks, Dom, I just finished listening to episode 4 of your latest podcast series where you and Austin, chairman of the board, covered 3 ways to dead drift a nymph. So question, he says, are we sure there aren't more ways than 3? Thanks for this series, says Mark. Austin, are there more than 3 ways? Last week, right? We
Yeah.
talked bottom bouncing, strike zone rides, and tracking.
Sure. I was reading over this earlier today, this question, and it got me thinking because I think it's a really good question. And I started to imagine all different forms of drifts, ways to present the nymph in order to get a dead drift. And while there may be multiple ways I achieve that, I think the concepts often stay the same. So I may have variations within the 3 versions of ways to get a dead drift, but I feel like they kept coming down to the same core values.
Same. I think you can use different skills to get to those 3 different ways, right?
Yeah, that's how I feel, right?
You brought up a nice point there when you said dead drift. Remember, those are 3
Exactly.
different ways to get true dead drifts. And we're going to acknowledge in episode 7 of this season, different things to do besides a dead drift.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think there are 3. And I've thought about it a lot. I mean, come on, you know me. I don't really just kind of publish stuff or put stuff out there without thinking it through pretty hard.
Yeah.
And fishing for a long time and kind of experiment. Same as you.
Right. You're a board member.
I was. I got kicked off. I caught too many fish. People were offended.
Oh yeah.
It's just for the guys who catch tiddlers like you.
What did the sloop say? If it has spots, click it. I love that line.
Slooper. We'll have to get him on a live podcast. Imagine that. All right, Austin, one more question here. This one is from Drew Paxton in Los Angeles. That's California, bud. Okay?
That's right.
All right. Dom and Austin, here's a question for your podcast. From season 10, episode 2, I just don't understand this idea of having no influence. You're fishing, ! You have to control the fly, right? ? Not saying you guys are wrong, but after listening to the pod twice, I still don't get it. That's his question. In L.A. This ain't no disco. Doom, doom, doodle-doom.
Oh, okay.
This is L.A. Doom, doom, doodle-doom.
What about L.A. woman?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyhow,
Anyway,
that's ridiculous.
answer his question, bud. The skills series.
You're right. No goofing around. That is another good observation. I think maybe the term influence could be viewed a couple different ways. And I think the way that I think about it, and perhaps, Dom, you're the same way, when I think about it in a nymphing situation, when I consider influence, I am trying to, especially I'm trying to minimize that, for the fly and still have awareness of what that fly is doing, but to make it appear to the fish as though it is drifting along completely naturally. So I do impart my own influence because I have attached to tippet and a rod tip and myself wherever I'm standing. That is the influence. But the other side of the coin is what it looks like underneath the water. So the influence I'm imparting myself is to make it look as if I wasn't there at all.
Especially when you're tracking. And lots of times with strike zone rides. I mean, I'm with you, but then other times I'm trying to, I don't know, do a speed lead or lead it. If I'm bottom bouncing, I know I'm influencing it, but I'm trying to make it look as natural as possible. I think for me, the answer to Drew's question really comes back to that slip and contact idea. He says, I just don't understand how you can have no influence. You're fishing, he says, like you have to control the fly. No, you don't. When you're fishing a dry fly, for example, you can see that, man, I'm not moving that fly at all.
Yeah.
If you get things set up right, you can have no influence on that dry fly. So
That's a
we
good way to
believe
put
that
it.
we believe if you get things set up right with a nymph, you can have almost no influence on that nymph, or extremely limited influence.
And if I were to continue on that analogy, then what I'm saying is, how you set yourself up in a nymph drift, just like you'd set yourself up in a dry fly cast, with the reach mend or any sort of, mends throughout the drift to make it look like as if that fly was drifting completely unattached to anything. Yet my influence of the leader and the control of that leader and the placement of that fly is allowing that to happen.
Very nice. When we were talking about tracking, I said I recommend to people think about not trying to move the fly, but move the tippet so that it doesn't influence the fly.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good.
A lot of different ways, man. And I do think it's some of those almost mental tricks that'll lead you to success.
Hmm.
I hope that helps out, Drew. I'm sure, well, I know other people kind of had similar thoughts and questions. But Austin, chairman of the board. Let's move into it, buddy. Let's get to our topic. Let's talk about weight. How about starting here, Mr. Chairman? Do you agree with what I said in the intro? Does weight matter more than the nymph pattern itself?
Well, Dominic, I should have paid attention in the intro.
You were pouring a beer. I saw that. You were focused on something else.
Let me actually think about that for a second so I can give a good answer.
Hmm.
After 1 million downloads, I've come to realize people actually listen to this.
That'll make the outro.
No, I do have a thought about this, but I feel myself coming back to it being related to weight. And how could it not be related to weight when you're fishing something that, well, it weighs something?
Yeah.
And
You want to disagree, but you're having a hard time disagreeing.
Well, you know, my brain first goes before weight as to where I want the fly to end up.
Mhm.
And if I don't want my fly to ride very deep, if I want it to ride mid column or upper column, what that fly is made out of,
Yeah.
it may be important, but what that fly is made out of also incorporates, well, how much weight's going to be built into it, or how much supplemental weight may be built into the rig itself.
Yep.
So yes and no. You know, there's ways around weight, I think, due to casting and placement and currents and other things. But man, you can't ignore it.
No, that's a good point about the casting. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I absolutely acknowledge that the sink rate is also determined by the material resistance, you know, what the fly is built from. We talked a few podcasts ago about, you know, chenille and rubber legs aren't going to sink as fast as just a perdigon, right? So that matters. But I think what matters most is the weight. And I think it does kind of just determine everything. It's the sink rate. It's the time it's going to take to get to the bottom, right? And now we're going to walk through it all. And I don't know, maybe we don't fully agree on that, and that's cool. But there's a lot to be said for that. It's really, really important. It might be even more important than, I'll say it that way, it might be even more important than the fly itself. You know, how the fly is designed can be perhaps equally as important or close to it.
Yeah.
But what matters most to the fish, right, is how it's presented. We've talked through that, and you and I are both big believers in presentation being more important than the pattern. I guess my point here is to say that many people might, you know, get into a rut, really, of changing the fly. I'm not catching fish. I should change the fly. I should change the fly. And really, I'm not saying anything new here by recommending that you change the weight instead of changing the fly.
Right on. That's good stuff.
Yeah. So real quick, let's address the 3 types of weight that we use. You just said, I mean, we can add split shot. Yeah. That can be lead shot, tin shot, they call it tin. It's like a tin allet. Tin never made any sense to me. Like, why are you building it out? Why are you making it out of tin? That's really light, right?
It's like I don't know. Yeah. It's like a Broken Heels can.
That's aluminum, bud.
That's true. AL versus, what's tin?
It's like you never even went to school.
What's the element for tin?
SN.
SN.
Really?
AL and SN.
All right. Anyway, we're talking about split shot, bud. And it's either lead or it doesn't matter.
Lead is PB for the record.
Doesn't matter what it's made out of.
PB is lead.
The point is you can use split shot. You can use drop shot. Drop shot is just split shot in a different position, right? And drop shot is all the way at the bottom. You put the weight at the very bottom. Now, I kind of am separating those here because I tend to do that in a lot of the Troutbitten materials. But I also, sometimes for drop shot, I'll use their little lead balls with a hook eye coming out of them. What I do is I just take jig hooks, hooks with lead balls molded to them. I think probably most people know what I'm talking about. And I just clip off the hook shanks. What you're left with is just, again, a lead ball with a hook eye coming out of it. Anyway, so there's types of weight. That's all we're doing here. It's just acknowledging the different types. And then, of course, weighted flies, which is certainly the most popular these days. You have beads made out of tungsten or brass. Do they make beads out of other
glass
materials? Oh, yeah, good point. And there's some weight in the glass beads. Plastic beads, good point. Yep. I don't think there's a lot of weight in the plastic or the glass compared.
No, not much.
Obviously, tungsten's the heaviest. We all know that. But, of course, too, you can wrap lead wire around the hook shank. So there's ways to weight your fly. Anyway, years ago, I wrote an article titled No Limits, Fish Every Type of Weight Available. And that really describes what we're recommending here. I'd say use whatever suits the situation. Sometimes one choice is better than another. And we're going to walk through all that in a moment. But first, can I bring up that there's a big angler resistance, let's say, to different kinds of weight? You run into that, Austin?
Yeah, I definitely do. As weighted flies become more and more popular, maybe more accepted as the norm, it becomes more taboo to fish a supplemental form of weight outside of your flies.
This makes no sense to me. Like, I meet anglers who refuse to use split shot because, I don't know, sometimes they say it's like bait fishing. I don't get it. But other anglers...
Knuckle dragging.
Just knuckle dragging, buddy.
Yep.
Seriously, when I wrote the 6-part Troutbitten series on drop shot nymphing, I had people say that drop shot and it's just cheating. It's way too easy. That's completely not true. That. It's not easy. It actually doesn't change things in that way at all. It changes how things drift, but it doesn't make you catch more fish necessarily. In some cases, yes. The point is, people find all kinds of reasons why they will not fish certain types of weight. But all of these weight types are viable, even though they all kind of, for some people, carry stigmas or really misunderstandings of, I don't know. I'll say, like, I meet a lot of anglers these days who will only fish weighted nymphs. They refuse then to use split shot. Now, you can not like it, but to say that that's not fly fishing. I don't get it, man.
It is funny where people choose to draw their lines. You could have the weight of a split shot built into your fly, but the moment it becomes separate from your fly itself, then it's something else.
Yeah, I don't know.
I see it the same way you do.
Yeah. So we're going to recommend using all types of weight tonight because that's what we do. And we're going to talk about why. But can we just admit first that weight is weight? Like between you and I, that's what we're saying. We're putting forth an argument here that weight is weight. You brought it up, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, that weight is the original sin of fly fishing. That's right. Once you add any weight, any type of weight, tungsten bead, split shot, sinking line, honestly, in my opinion, that's it. You've committed that sin, right? I don't really think it's a sin, but like you aren't just pure dry fly fishing anymore. You're not even like pure just wet fly fishing. It's not the same anymore. As soon as you add weight, there you go. And I don't care about there is no difference in the weight to me. That's what we're saying. Like style points don't matter.
Style points.
Right.
Yeah. It's not more cool or less cool to do either one.
No,
so whatever
it's
works
not.
the best at the given time is what we're all about.
Yeah. Nothing is more fly fishing than the other. That's what we think anyway. We did a full podcast on weight types I went back and looked it up. It is season 5, episode 4. I'll link that in the show notes. All the guys, Bill and Trevor and Josh and Matt and Austin talked about the different types of weights, kind of the things we're talking about here. And we walked through the reasons you would use different types for a lot of different styles of fishing. Now here we're really focused on nymphs. And we're really not even talking about exactly how we're going to rig them and everything. It's more of the concept, why you might use one over the other. Let's kind of get there. For over a decade, Smith Creek has helped anglers just like you to free up your hands, hold your gear within easy reach, and keep our waters clean. Smith Creek's family of patented accessories are tested guide tough and backed by good old-fashioned customer service. Crafted from rugged materials like anodized marine-grade aluminum and UV-resistant nylon, Smith Creek products are hand-assembled with pride and built to last. To stay up to date on their latest specials and new product releases, be sure to follow Smith Creek on Instagram at SmithCreekNZ. Quality you can depend on from a brand you can trust. That's Smith Creek. The landscape is changing for trout anglers. No doubt you've already noticed another truck at your favorite access point and seen more anglers on the water. For those looking for new challenges and fishing opportunities, Trout Routes has the data to help you avoid the crowds and explore new public water. Trout Routes has mapped more than 50,000 trout streams across the country with curated, detailed maps of public land and access points. Trout Routes has developed integrated and interactive data, putting the tools in your hands to research new water and help you navigate in the wild to know exactly where you stand in the current. It's still up to you to find those deep pools and undercuts, but Trout Routes helps you get on the water, connecting you with resources like fly shops and stream gauges for trout water across the country. Download Trout Routes in the App Store today and visit troutroutes.com to learn more.
All right. Well, yeah. So let's get into that. Why do we choose beadhead sometimes, drop shot sometimes, and split shot other times?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are choices that we make. Where the weight is makes a big difference in how the fly is presented. Whether it's in the fly or not, the fly is going to drift differently. If the fly is heavily weight, if the fly has any weight, it's going to drift differently than an unweighted fly. That's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
So it really does matter. You get a different look. It does make a big difference. And you can do a lot of different things. Yeah, let's get into it. Why would you choose weighted flies?
Sure. I think most of the time for me in my fishing, if I can use the weight of the flies and just the weight of the flies, if they're weighted, we're saying, I will go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
The least amount of things I can have attached to my leader and to my tippet, the better for me. And weighted flies create that advantage where I think sometimes you can get a more natural look because there's less things coming into resistance with currents.
Good point.
There's less things to manage under there. So if I can get away fishing weighted flies, I'll do that. Mm-hmm. Now, when I fish them, it's because, I need some extra help either getting to the bottom or I want a certain look. If I'm fishing much shallower water or lower conditions, I may still fish a weighted fly, but they may be very lightly weighted. So not everything that's weighted means it's really heavy.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, so I'm with you. I prefer to fish weighted flies. It's cleaner. You have less things down there to catch, vegetation on the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Or to catch the bottom. Talk about that in a second. But your strike detection is better. That's undeniable.
Good point. Yeah.
I think that's undeniable. You are directly then in touch with your nymphs, or your indicator can be directly in touch with the nymphs if that's how you're fishing. Those are definite advantages. I use split shot though quite a bit, probably more than anybody in our group, I would say. Like Bill doesn't like split shot, right? I know that Matt doesn't use it much. We could go through the guys, but I know you do. I know Trevor does quite a bit.
I know you use it more than I do.
Yeah, more than anybody in the group.
So that doesn't surprise me if you were to say that.
I did come to nymphing and to fly fishing in a time before tungsten beads.
Right on.
I remember when brass beads first got to Fly Fisher's Paradise, our local fly shop.
That's great.
And I remember Steve Sowinski saying he didn't like them. He said, it was almost like what Kelly Gallup said recently about beaded flies. He said, they have no soul. He didn't say about it. He was talking about perdigons. Gallup said they have no soul. And so that was a good way to put it. But that's kind of what Steve was saying. He just didn't like it. He didn't like the look of a bead. We've acknowledged here, we don't like the look of a really over-beaded fly, like a 4-millimeter bead on a size 18 nymph. That's not an 18 nymph anymore. It's not. Anyway, don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I use split shot because that's what I used first, too. I'm glad I did because I'm really comfortable with it. I have a good way of doing it. That's another podcast topic. I do have articles about that. I'm good at it, to be honest. I can put it on, take it off. It doesn't slide. I can do that quickly, and no, it doesn't slide.
Yeah.
It's good for me. I'm glad that I got into nymphing at that time where it is part of my system because I can do different things with split shot than I can with just weighted flies. I said a second ago that weighted flies they're not going to drift like unweighted flies.
Right.
And this is what people are missing the most. Those who are super bought into the idea, I just always use weighted flies, are really missing something. I get it, like the competition scene, those guys, they cannot use split shot. Fair enough. That doesn't mean it's the best thing. I use right now an unweighted egg with split shot, 5 inches in front. We've talked about this before too, but I'm not riding it 10 or 12 inches up. I'm going to ride it 5 inches up above that egg. Up the leader, I'm saying, up the tip and above that egg. So that gives the egg, or whatever unweighted nymph. I use crest bugs, sometimes just simple waltz worms. I call them fur nymphs, right?
Yep.
I put them 5 inches away so they get this 5 inches of grace, slack, little bit of freedom of movement, 5 inches of freedom of movement. That's a really different look than a weighted fly that's always trying to drop. The unweighted crest bug or egg is very much neutrally buoyant. You can watch it
right on
in the water. I've fished this so much, I can say this with confidence now. For a long time, I almost doubted it. But a weighted fly will hang up more than an unweighted fly with equal weight of split shot.
I think that makes sense, right?
I don't know. Most people will tell you, hey, with two things down there, you're going to hang up twice as much.
Oh,
And I'll say this, when you do stick, well, then now you got two things that can be
sure.
grabbing a log or a rock or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've been really thinking about this the last couple of weeks and just really paying attention. And I'll go back and forth. You know the egg we've been using, the little miracle egg.
That's right.
And that's got a bead on it.
That's
It
right.
is a damn good producer right now. And then I go back and forth to the unweighted egg patterns that I usually use this time of year. And I am just positive that I'm hanging up less if I'm really trying to bottom bounce like we talked about last week. If my goal is to touch and tick, to tick, 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 to do that, then I absolutely hang up less when just a round shot is ticking. I guess that does make sense then, right?
So
Because
the way
the
I picture
unweighted
it,
egg is up above it. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, you said it exactly right there. When I picture it, there's a split shot that's touching the bottom. And because, as you mentioned, that egg is neutrally buoyant, or that crest bug is neutrally buoyant, so it has a tendency to want to lift and kind of stay a little bit higher. And while the split shot is bottom bouncing, that egg is a little bit suspended above from where your split shot is.
Yeah.
So I think it does make sense that you hang up less, because I think the fly is probably touching the bottom much less.
Yeah. And the shot doesn't hang up like a hook does, right? And
No, not at all.
You can have weighted flies that invert, and you should,
Mm-hmm.
if you know you're going to be in contact with the bottom. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, it just drifts differently. I get excited about this. You can tell that I get excited about this because it's something I do that I feel like I get to share with a lot of people. When I'm guiding,
Right.
people will often say, we're going to use split shot. Yeah. Because they're not eating weighted flies. And one of the best things I can do is just use flies without beads. I swear.
Right.
Some of the rivers around here, in the most pressured places, at the most pressured times, in a low clear water, yes, the most sensitive fish are avoiding beads.
Sure.
And you could say, well, okay, they're avoiding bright metallic beads, so I'll put a black bead on. I still do better with those little crest bugs and the unweighted waltz worms, or a sulfur nymph with no bead on it, and split shot.
Yeah. And I think the reason that you use it so much, and that the fact that you have it dialed into the place that you do, is because you have a really good system in place where you're comfortable putting it on and taking it off. So if any of the listeners out there haven't seen the Troutbitten video that Dom and Josh put together on a split shot system, I really encourage you to go and watch that, because it may completely change your understanding of how you can use it and how it can be utilized out on the river.
Yeah, that's a good point. We should probably move on from split shot before I get too excited.
Sure.
The third type of weight, of course, is drop shot. We mentioned that. I kind of explained it already, and I will acknowledge too, among our group, I definitely drop shot more than the rest of you guys. Probably the rest of you guys combined. But I love drop shot when I'm really trying to touch the bottom and really, tick along like I was saying.
That's right.
You can get drift after drift. You could touch the bottom 100 times, maybe 200 times, 200 ticks, right, of the bottom, just skipping over rocks before you ever even come close to hanging up. And when you do hang up, it just slides right out if you get the right angle. I mean,
a lot more control there.
It is. It's a ton of control. It's, for me, a lot of fun to fish that way. Trout do not always eat that presentation.
Sure.
I kind of have in mind that we should do a drop shot skill series someday, maybe 4 or 5 parts.
That'd be neat.
There is a full article series on Troutbitten all about it. So we're not going to get into it a whole bunch here, not a whole lot more. It's another way. It's another way to add weight to the system, and you need it, right? That's a point here about weight. I say use as much weight as you need. Don't try to stay light if it's not working, right? There's a strange resistance, just like the resistance to different styles of weights. There's a strange resistance to weight among many fly anglers. I've seen it often that people say, well, it's almost assumed, none of us like to add weight, but sometimes we have to, so here's how we do it. Like, what? I don't get it. I really don't get this. I've been adding weight since the beginning. That's just, you put weight on, you're fishing underneath. I like to add weight. I'm not going, I wish I didn't have to, but I'll add a little bit of weight and see if that works. That's not how I approach it. I go, all right, this water's heavy. If I'm fishing your river tomorrow, Austin, I'm going to need a good bit of weight. I'm probably going to start with something like 75 centigrams. Which, I don't know, like a number 10 stone fly with the 4 millimeter bead, right? And even some lead wraps.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to need it. It's necessary. Like I have no hang-ups about adding weight, whatever is needed.
Yeah, I think maybe there's a pride or some sort of
I don't get it.
some sort of standard that's trying to be reached by saying, "Hey, I didn't have to put on XYZ in order to catch that fish."
Yeah, I don't know.
You know, I really had to struggle all day long to get my flies down, but you know, I got them down there.
I don't know. I hope that's not it.
Don't do it the hard way if you don't have to.
Yeah, I don't get it. You already sinned, right? You surrender to the concept of you're adding weight. You've already sinned, so add more weight if that's what you need.
Yeah.
Use the right tool for the job. Don't avoid what works. If what works is 50 more centigrams, or going from, it doesn't matter if you like to fish a 2 millimeter bead or, 15 centigrams. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
If that's not working tomorrow for me on your river, Austin, and it wouldn't get me down anyway, then I'm not using 15 centigrams. I'm going to need that bigger 4 millimeter bead, or let's say 2 number 1 split shots, probably take 3.
Yeah. And how many times have we seen that? And how many times do we have to learn the same lesson until it can sink in that just a little bit of a change can make a huge difference? You know, we're not talking about going from really light to super heavy. You could be going, and all that's relative too, right? Light and heavy. Who knows what that means? It's all relative to the fishing situation.
That's why I throw numbers out there.
Yeah, exactly.
People make fun of me.
You make it less relative. But you know whatever it is, 5-10 centigrams. Oh,
yeah.
This drift is now a lot cleaner. It's put me a couple inches more down towards the bottom, where I'm in that different current of water, right? And maybe now I'm in the strike zone a lot quicker and easier than I was before. It doesn't have to be dramatic changes. You know, like Humphrey said, the difference between a good day and a great day can be one split shot.
One split shot. One number 6 split shot, which is like 10 centigrams, right?
I'm going to trust you on that. I haven't weighed a number 6 split shot.
Listen, the only reason I do centigrams is because I mix beads, weight in the fly in the form of tungsten beads, mix that with split shot. And I could go number 1 split shot or a 3.5 millimeter bead. We should have pointed this out earlier. I mean, I mix and match. I mean, I'll be, if I'm using, right here,
I'm picturing you pulling out of your vest like this conversion chart where it says, I want to be XYZ here. I need a 3 over here and a 2 down here. Okay, I need a number 10 with this at bead size.
I know, that's fair. It sounds like that, but I just started weighing everything in centigrams. A number 1 split shot weighs 30 centigrams, and a number 4 weighs like 20 centigrams. And then, again, like a 2 millimeter bead weighs about 15 centigrams. And I don't know, I just add them up. And I went centigrams because it was easier to just kind of think about it. To be quite honest, I don't even think about the grams anymore, the centigrams anymore. I really don't. Yeah. I just kind of see it and feel it.
Right.
But it's really good to learn, weigh things for a while, get a little gram scale, see what happens.
Yeah. That's something I should do. I as much as I poke at it, I do admire the fact that you do it. So it brings some reality to the situation.
Well, like you said, people say, I was fishing light. What the hell does that mean?
Exactly.
Your light is, and your heavy is different than mine, and the next, it doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
It really has to do with people's watersheds,
Yep.
If you come from a totally different part of the country where your rivers are really big and mine are really small, then what I'm calling heavy is going to be probably your light. Strange, right? That's the trouble with talking about fishing in general. There's just so many variables, and so people are coming from so many different angles and understandings of the way things are. So more or less weight. And what's good or bad about that? With everything we said, there's definitely a difference in how drifts look by using more or less weight. And we've acknowledged the types of weight, and that use what you need. You want to know what your goals are, and how do you want the flies to drift? I talked about the difference between split shot drifts versus weighted fly drifts, and you can combine them too. Yeah, absolutely, you can combine these different weight types. When we say use what's necessary, I guess we mean what's necessary to reach your goals. We're not saying you always want to be right near the bottom. What are your goals? Maybe your goal is to be light.
Yeah, how much weight is probably the most consequential decision you make about nymphing.
See, now you agree, right?
I undo.
Yeah, nope, you said it.
I'm going to rephrase it. How much weight is one of the most consequential decisions you make when you're nymphing?
one of them, but not necessarily the most critical decision, huh?
in my opinion.
Okay. Now I'm with you. So a couple things about more weight. Like you can get down sooner. With more weight, you're going to drop sooner. That's not a mystery to people.
Absolutely. With more weight, you also get more control over the system. You'll be able to hold the bottom easier too. You can do that bottom bouncing technique.
Just more control in general. We say that a lot. More weight equals more control. Doesn't even have to be a whole bunch more weight. Doesn't have to be heavy. We're not saying heavy gives you more control, just more weight.
Yep.
A little bit more weight gives you a little bit more control.
Yep.
And then control really leads to influence. All right. And we did full podcast on that. And Drew had confusions about how you can be having such little influence over your flies, but it's possible. It is. And with less weight, you're going to have less influence. But anyway, more weight gives us that control leading to influence. Like you said, you can hold the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
If you're bottom bouncing, you have to have more weight. You don't have to have a ton, but you need to be, let's say, slightly overweighted at least, so that you can stay on the bottom after you skip that next rock. Tick. Well, okay, it needs to fall after it ticks, not just kind of hold up there. If you're actually trying to bottom bounce, you do need a little bit extra weight.
Mm-hmm. On days where it's really windy, extra weight helps you hold a seam and not get blown around so bad. It's really easy for the wind to blow against your leader and to lift the flies off the bottom or wherever they may be. But if you have a little bit more weight down there, there's more resistance to that happening. That's
an interesting point because you're starting to bring in then, things that don't necessarily have to do with the flies so much and how it's looking down there as like external conditions almost.
Right.
And there you have the wind. Another possibly external condition, you could think of it like this, is leader sag. If you have a little bit thicker leader for different reasons, maybe you like the way the thicker leader casts, and now you're casting possibly a little bit outside of what that leader does best, a little further, a little more distance, you can get some leader sag, especially if you have lighter flies, and there's all these things. But if you have leader sag, there's enough weight to counteract that leader sag. And it doesn't mean that you have to throw 50 more centigrams on there. It could be 10 more centigrams. Just kind of balances out that leader sag.
Yeah, and with that, if you're fishing a little bit further outside your system, a little more weight also helps you cast further.
Yeah, Bill brought that up not too long ago when we were talking about leaders, and he was just saying, the extra weight will help you get out there further.
Sure.
We kind of like to build a leader that has a lot of punch and power, so the leader is pushing things to a target, but you can also use a little bit of extra weight, to help fight through the wind too, but even if there's not wind, just to help you get that little bit of extra distance, or maybe a lot of extra distance, and then counteract some leader sag. If you're good at controlling that, once it's in the water and all that stuff, you can get great looking dead drifts too.
Right on. Another thing to mention here is that you can really slow down a drift with additional weight. We talked before about getting those really slow bottom rolls with an egg pattern or something unweighted, or it could be weighted too. But if you have a heavier rig, you can get a slower drift because
friction on the bottom.
There you go.
Put the brakes on. That's the way I've been thinking about it lately. That's how you put the brakes on. You can't do it from where you're standing if you're fishing upstream. You can't do it from where you're standing, but you can let the river, the friction of the riverbed on that weight, slow everything down. It's the only way to get that drift. Is with a little bit more weight.
Mm-hmm.
So those are good things about using more weight. What are some good things about using less weight?
Right on. So an advantage of using less weight is you can get a longer drop through a drift.
Yeah.
If you're in a situation where you don't want to get on the bottom right away, but you want to kind of fish a slow drop, less weight will help you do that.
Yeah, for sure. It's like we talked about last week with the tracking concept. That's critical to that presentation, is using lighter weight. You can't track with heavier weights, with heavy weights. And it has a lot to do with how deep the water is and how fast the water is and your angles and stuff like that too. But that is a big advantage. If the trout are looking up, then you can stay in their sight for longer if you're using lighter weights. I've had a lot of people tell me that they believe they'll get a more natural look with lighter weights. It is hard to argue with. And we talked about this when we were addressing more or less influence. Mm-hmm. Again, less influence comes from having less weight over the flies. It's hard to argue against that. And if you're good at controlling everything in the system and still keep maintaining your strike detection and stuff, I think it can be a really natural look, and it can really benefit you to use almost the lightest weight possible. if that's the look you're going for. It can look really natural. But
Yeah.
if you're good at manipulating those heavier weights, that can look just as natural, but in a different way, like we
Sure.
talked about.
And I think if we were to imagine nymphs moving around on the bottom and getting washed around, they're pretty uninhibited when they're doing that. And something that's really lightly weighted and can move freely like that through the river, it may look very natural compared to something that's heavy and slowed down and maybe something just less smooth or something.
Well, what you just touched on there gets me back to the split shot idea. I can have a heavier split shot because I'm going to need it in your river tomorrow, which is running pretty heavy. And so I need a heavier split shot. But if I pair that with unweighted flies, I can kind of get that idea of what you just said. I can have nymphs down there that are just kind of rolling along, sort of at their own will, sort of. They're being towed along by the split shot, but they get those moments of grace. I think that's a way you can very much combine this more weight idea with, well, in the split shot then, with less weight or no weight in the nymph itself. It's pretty cool. But yeah, less weight, less influence, perhaps more natural in the right conditions, right?
Sure.
Whether it's after a fishing trip or at a backyard fire, you can bet the Troutbitten crew has a case of New Trail Broken Heels along with us. It's honestly our favorite beer. This hazy IPA is smooth and full-bodied. Hand-selected Citra hops lead to notes of bright clementine and juicy ruby red grapefruit. Broken Heels is a keeper. New Trail beer is proudly brewed in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and delivered cold to your favorite craft beer retailer every week. At New Trail, it's not about being the best angler. It's about getting out there. So enjoy nature's moments and reward yourself for a day well fished with New Trail Broken Heels. It's Troutbitten's favorite beer. What's the trouble with weight, though? You know what I mean?
Well, gravity, for example.
Right.
Weight will never want to stop dropping. So you have to fight that or manage that, really.
Gravity. That's it, right? I don't care how light it is. Like we said, if you just took your lightest nymph in your box, dropped it in the water, not attached to a tippet, it's going to fall. It's going to keep falling. It's going to hit the riverbed pretty quickly. That's the trouble. We talked about this very early on in this podcast series. And I think everybody, you can see, well, you can hear now how everything's dovetailing together.
Sure.
And we could have thrown all this into one conversation that would have been 4 hours long. But this is a good way to do it in these bite-sized chunks. And then tackling this concept of weight, we're realizing how it really goes into the more influence or less. Do we want to bottom bounce? Do we want to strike zone ride? Do we want to track the flies and things like that? It all blends together as we're navigating through these concepts. Yeah, weight just wants to keep falling. But you have to have it, right? It's necessary to fish underneath. You have to learn to control it.
Yep.
So another thing really to acknowledge is tippet diameter, because it matters a lot too. We didn't want to dedicate a full episode to this because we really don't think there's all that much to it. But some anglers are really just as focused on tippet diameter and that sink rate as they are with weight.
Good point.
And that's fair. That's fair. But I don't think it's as complex as the weight selection. That's how I think about it anyway.
Yeah, it goes back to the concept of making everything thinner and thinner and thinner, and in turn lighter and lighter, so you can fish further away, get less sag, all those things, cut water faster. But for us, and I think the other guys in the crew would agree, we like to kind of fish maybe the thickest diameter we can get away with, and then choose a fly selection around that. So that's why we often find ourselves fishing 4 and 5X rather than 6 and 7, because it allows us to be quite versatile.
Yeah.
There is more strength there for when we do hook into a larger fish, and you're not breaking off flies on the bottom or in trees nearly as much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to donate.
Donations. It's a Trout Unlimited meeting last night where I was giving the presentation. I was talking to a couple guys afterward, and we were talking about rigs, as we always do, leaders and stuff. And he was asking me about tippet, and I said 4X. I'm fishing 4X, and he looked like stunned. And he could not. He really, I could tell even by the end of our conversation, that he really didn't believe you could catch as many fish on 4X as he fishes 7X all the time. I mean, good. Go ahead, fish 7X, great. But like you said, there's downsides to it.
Yeah.
And I said, nah. I'm not going to fish 1X and 2X to my nymphs, but I like fishing 4.
Right.
I said that's my standard. And I'll go to 5 a lot of times, and even to 6. I said the way I think about it is the fly needs to wiggle, needs to have freedom. It's really just like a dry fly.
Right on.
So I match the tippet diameter to the fly size. Again, just like a dry fly, I'm not going to put a size 20 blue wing olive or pseudocleon, Matt Grobe, I'm not going to put that on 3X because the fly has no wiggle room. And we see it up top.
Mhm.
Again, you can see it on a dry fly. You go, that's just kind of stiff there. So I put it on 6X. I do. I put it on 6X. When I fish tricos, I'll even go down to 7X. The tricos are like size 26 sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of take the same concept underneath. Now, to be honest, I'm not going, okay, I'm going to fish that number 10 stonefly now. So now I'm going to fish a 3X or 4X. And now I'm going to my number 14. So I'm going to go down to 5X. I just choose 4X or 5X for everything until I really start to fish small. If I'm fishing, my general rule of thumb is if I'm fishing 18s or smaller, I'll go down to 6X on nymphs.
Yeah, I think for the exact reasons you just mentioned, allows for another natural look because, again, those are going to be lighter flies often. And, we may fish those quite differently than we are going to be fishing a size 10 Waltz worm or something that's heavily weighted. A lot of times we're tracking those flies or fishing them in lighter water, and they just look better when they have their own movement to them.
Yeah, those really light flies, those really small flies need that ability to move. All the flies need that ability to move, but you see it. You can attach a 3X tippet, to a big hopper or a yellow Sally. You like that one, Austin?
Hey, no, I missed the yellow Sally.
Did you fish that when you were out west?
I did.
Yeah. So anyway, 3X works great with that. Just doesn't work great with the number 20 pseudocleon, right? Same thing underneath. I'll tell you another thing. I mean, when you're fishing 7X, it's going to tangle up more. Your tags are going to wrap around the main line more. You just have more troubles. And this isn't a podcast about tippet diameter. We've actually done that, haven't we?
I'm just going to say, I think we have.
I think we did. Maybe I'll link to that too. I had one more thought there as we were talking about this. What about sinking lines for nymphs, Austin? That's the one type of weight that we haven't really covered. I mentioned it in the intro. I said, when I was talking about streamers, how you need weight to get the streamers down. I said about sinking lines. You ever use sinking lines with nymphs?
Just like a regular sinking line, but with nymphs attached to them?
Yeah.
No, never.
Yeah.
We're trying to have the most direct connection to the weight in our flies, or at least in our terminal tackle. And when we have a ton of weight built into the fly line, it becomes impossible to perceive what is a strike or a take underneath, unless you're fishing an indicator. And I don't know why you would be with a sinking line. But there's just too much going on there. There's way too much slop.
Yeah, to be quite honest, I don't know anybody that does that. I brought up Joe Brooks last week, and in a Joe Brooks book, he was talking about using a sinking line for
back
nymphs.
in the day. Yeah,
long time ago. I think it's a bad idea for all the reasons you said, and it takes all your sensitivity away. You don't really know. You don't really have control. You don't really know where things are going. It's a bad idea. But at least we acknowledged it. It's another way to put weight on us, in the system. Anything else though, Austin? What did we miss? Smart guy. I stumped him. Everybody out there, I got Austin. That's why I put it here. Anything else?
Shh. I'm thinking.
Ooh, I got him good. He's got nothing. Dumb guy.
DUMB. I would just say again, if you haven't,
I'm gonna repeat something. Yeah.
if you haven't experimented or given split shot or drop shot a fair chance, the next time you're out and you find yourself needing a little bit of an extra advantage in terms of weight, consider going to a split shot on your line or a drop shot and see what that does for you. Again, it doesn't have to be a lot of weight. It can just be, as Dom said, a small number 6 shot or something like that. But try something different the next time you're out than you normally do every time you're fishing, because it makes it fun. It makes it fresh. It gives you a chance to learn something. Yeah. That's the goal.
No, I'm with you. I told you guys last summer, that was my kind of ace in the hole.
Right on.
When things would get tough, I was like, going to fur nymphs and split shot. It got to the point where I was starting out with that rig.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big deal. It is now because everybody is using beads. The easiest thing to do to show the fish something different is stop using beads.
Right on.
They drift differently. It's not even just about taking away the metallic shine of the bead. It's that they drift differently, maybe more naturally. I got excited about it again.
Mm-hmm. I got to throw out all the beaded flies in my box now.
Mm-hmm.
They're no good.
They're useless.
Get rid of them.
They're useless. Knuckle dragging. Maybe everything would just go back to split shot someday.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, they won't.
Beads will become knuckle dragging. In some circles, they most certainly are. Anyhow.
Anyway.
I digress.
All right, there it is. Surrender to weight because it's the fundamental factor of fishing nymphs. Lightweight is good, and heavier weight is good too. Everything works sometimes. So if you have the skills to fish with all types of weights and a full range of weights, you'll be able to adapt to anything, getting a variety of great presentations on any day, in any conditions, to any fish. Okay, next week we're tackling the concept of line on the water. Because if we do this with intention, with a plan, we open up another whole bag of tricks. So then, Mr. Chairman of the Troutbitten Board, is that what we should call it? Board of Trustees. Mr. Chairman of the Troutbitten Board of Trustees, Austin Dando, will you read us out?
I certainly will. Okay, remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 1,000 articles with endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more.
Hey now!
Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and the tags too. Be sure to find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, now featuring the Troutbitten Tip Series, the Fish and Film Series, and the Troutbitten Fly Box, all in collaboration with Wilds Media. Wilds Media. Wild. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten Podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a comment because that really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water.
Hey now!
Well, Dominic, I should have paid attention in the intro.
I don't get it, man.
After 1 million downloads, I've come to realize people actually listen to this.
You might as well put your best foot forward.
I know. Very good, Dominic, in my opinion.
Tick,
Hey now.
tick,
Hey now.
tick.
But try something different.